My name is Maren Vale and I'm 35 years old. For 4 years, my parents told everyone I had disappeared. That was the story they built and repeated at family dinners, church gatherings, and every phone call from relatives asking where I was. I had vanished, gone without explanation, an ungrateful daughter who had abandoned her family for no reason. The truth was much simpler. I stopped answering because I finally understood what every call from home really meant. They always began with warmth. "How are you, sweetheart?" Then came the request: rent, medical bills, my younger brother's tuition, my father's latest failed business idea. There was always an emergency, always a reason, and somehow I was always expected to solve it. For 12 years, I sent part of every paycheck home. I told myself that was love. It took me far too long to realize it was fear disguised as loyalty. The breaking point came when I lost my job during a corporate downsizing. For the first time in years, I had nothing left to give. I called my mother expecting concern, maybe comfort. I wanted to hear someone ask if I was all right. Instead, she said, "How are we supposed to pay the electric bill?" Not once did she ask about my job. Not once did she ask whether I was scared. Something inside me finally broke. I stopped calling, I stopped answering. And within months, I learned through a cousin that my parents had started telling everyone I had disappeared. Apparently, admitting I had walked away was too uncomfortable. It was easier to make themselves victims than to admit they had drained me until there was nothing left. I moved twice over the next 4 years, each time farther from anyone who might come searching. Slowly, carefully, I rebuilt my life. I found steady work in logistics management. I made friends who wanted my company, not my money. I bought a small house with a blue front door and painted it myself one Sunday afternoon. For the first time in my adult life, my home belonged entirely to me. No emergencies waited behind the door. No one needed anything. There was only quiet. Then, one Thursday evening in early autumn, someone came looking for me. I heard footsteps on my porch. When I looked through the window, I saw a woman holding up her phone, taking a picture of my front door. It took me 3 seconds to recognize her. My sister, Alara. I opened the door. She slowly lowered her phone, and the colour drained from her face. Alara stared at me as if I had stepped out of a nightmare. Her eyes moved from my face to the blue door behind me, then to the porch light and the welcome mat with my initials stitched into one corner. This was not a stranger's house. This was undeniably me, alive. "Maren," she whispered. I nodded. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Then she took a step backward. "Alara?" She didn't answer. She backed down the porch steps, her phone already pressed against her ear. Her hands were shaking. "Mom," she said when someone answered. "You need to see this. It's not what you—" Her voice cracked. Then she turned and hurried toward her car. I stood in the doorway, stunned. The look on her face wasn't the look of someone who had found a runaway. It was the look of someone who had seen a ghost. I remained there long after her car disappeared. What had my mother told her? What could make my own sister look at me as though I shouldn't exist? Nearly an hour later, I finally called her. She answered immediately. "Maren," she said, her voice trembling. "Are you all right?" There was a long silence. Then she whispered, "You're really alive." I almost laughed, but nothing about the situation was funny. "Of course I'm alive." Another silence followed. Then Alara told me something that changed the entire shape of the last 4 years. 18 months earlier, our mother had told the entire extended family that I had died. Not disappeared, died. According to her story, I had been killed in an out-of-state car accident. My body had supposedly been cremated far from home, leaving the family with no funeral to attend. My mother claimed the grief was too painful to discuss. Alara had believed her. She had cried at a memorial gathering in our parents' backyard. There had been a small table with my photograph, flowers, and a candle my mother lit every Sunday. I sat on my living room floor, unable to speak. My mother had killed me on paper because death was cleaner than abandonment. Death brought sympathy. It brought casseroles, condolences, and understanding. Most importantly, it stopped people from asking questions. Why hadn't anyone filed a missing person report? Why hadn't the police investigated? Why had nobody seen my body? A dead daughter couldn't walk through the door and expose a lie. But 18 months later, my father discovered an old pay stub among my abandoned belongings. Suddenly, my supposed death became inconvenient. He wondered whether I might still have a job, a bank account, money. Perhaps if they found me, they could somehow rebuild the pipeline they had lost. That was why Alara had been sent to search, not to find her sister, to find a source of income. And then she had found me standing behind a blue door. I asked Alara the question that mattered most. Have you told them? No, she said immediately. I hung up on Mom. She sounded lost. She had spent 18 months mourning a sister who had never been gone. Now the person she had cried for was standing alive in front of her, while the parent she trusted had created the lie. I need time, she whispered. I understood. It wasn't only me they had betrayed. They had made Alara grieve. They had turned my life into a funeral and forced her to mourn someone who was still living quietly 2 states away. So I told her she could take all the time she needed. And Alara, I added, my door is always open to you. Unlike our parents, I meant it. We talked for 3 hours that night. She told me about the years I had missed, the family gatherings, the small celebrations, the arguments, and the quiet moments that had happened while everyone believed I was dead. I told her about my life, the house, the blue door, the job I had rebuilt after losing everything, the friends who never asked me for money, the peace I had fought so hard to create. By the end of the call, something between us had changed. For the first time in years, we were speaking honestly. In the weeks that followed, Alara made her own choice. She didn't expose our parents publicly. She didn't demand an apology. She knew, as I did, that any apology from them would probably be about losing access to me, not about hurting me. Instead, she simply stepped away. She stopped being the messenger. She stopped searching for answers on their behalf. She stopped being the daughter expected to fix everything. And she started visiting me. At first she came cautiously, then more often. We sat on my porch in the evenings while I watered the small garden along the fence. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we said almost nothing. Both were enough. My parents never came looking again. Perhaps they finally understood that some doors, once closed for the sake of survival, don't reopen simply because the lie behind them has become inconvenient. I think about that autumn evening often. The way Alara's face went pale, the way her voice cracked when she called our mother. The strange mercy of being declared dead by people who had never truly known me alive. For years, I had believed family meant enduring anything, paying anything, forgiving everything. Now I understand something different. Love should not require you to disappear piece by piece. And sometimes, the family you choose to protect your peace with matters far more than the family that only remembers you when they need something. I had not disappeared. I had simply stopped allowing them to consume me, and behind my blue door, I finally learned what it felt like to be alive.